Welcome back, folks. Today, we're making our own ink. So, just starting out, there's two things we gotta do. You gotta pop all the caps off of your acorns, put them in a grinder, and we're also gonna need to take our vinegar, and we're gonna need fine steel wool. First, let's take care of the acorns. So now that we've decapped our acorns, I just want a quick disclaimer. You should be aware that you could potentially chop off your fingers, poison yourself, and burn down your house during this project, so just be careful. But with that out of the way, let's grind up some acorns. Acorn dust. Don't breathe this. So as you can see, this isn't exactly perfect, but it's not going to hurt anything. We're not making the world's finest ink. So go ahead and pour them into the container. Then we've got to add some water. I like to use distilled, but honestly, you really don't need to use it. Like I said, we're not making the world's finest ink. You can just use tap water. But when it comes to how much water to use, I usually say 1-to-1 ratio is a good starting point. So if the dry acorns are 1 inch deep, then add enough water to make the whole thing 2 inches deep. Now if you're going to use it in pens and stuff, you might want to add more water so that it flows better. So once you've added your water, you turn the crock pot to low, or add heat, however, and just let it go. You're going to want to run it for a minimum of 24 hours. I usually do around 48 hours. So while our acorns are still cooking, take your vinegar and you want to add it to a jar that has the superfine steel wool all nice and fluffed up. Now this is going to cause a chemical reaction to basically rust. It's creating oxides on the steel wool, or rusting the wool. Now this reaction generates heat and it generates hydrogen. So you never want to do it in a sealed container. There's a real risk of the container bursting. But what I like to do is put the lid on just to shake it up so that the steel wool is completely soaked, and then immediately take the lid off and let it sit. And you'll see that the steel that's exposed to air rusts faster than the stuff that's soaked. So you just keep putting the lid on, shaking it, take the lid off, let it sit. And this takes about 4 days, so you're going to be doing that every few hours for the next 4 days. And when it comes to how much of this mix to make, well, basically, however much water you've added to these acorns, you're going to want to use that much vinegar to make your mix. Smaller amounts, you will only need about half of a pad of steel wool, and larger amounts, you can use a whole pad like I am. So, we've got our acorns cooking, we've got our steel wool rotting. Now, what I like to do periodically, just come in, give it a quick little stir, a little bit of agitation. And you just want to keep doing that every time you get a chance. And you can see our stain mix is coming along very nice. We're collecting a lot of oxides in here. So it's not quite done yet. So now that it's been 48 hours, shut it off until it's cool to the touch. Let's get to straining. Boy, this smells delicious. So first thing I'm going to do is use a pretty coarse strainer. Strain it into this container. So I usually give it a couple of minutes, get all the water out of there. Now you want to keep in mind that the amount of water you have here is probably twice as what you'll have once we're done precipitating out all the heavy stuff and filtering. And once you're done straining the water out of your acorn mush, you're going to want to dispose of this right away, because as soon as you shut the heat off, this is starting to mold. There's a lot of chunky stuff in here that made it through the coarse strainer, and we want to make it all fall to the bottom, and then we'll pour off the good stuff from the top. Now to aid in that, we're going to add a little bit of isopropyl alcohol. I use 91%. I'm sure the small differences wouldn't make a huge difference. Probably just make it take a little bit longer. So I don't add too much. I don't actually have a measurement, so you can see how the heavier stuff is already starting to separate out. It's lighter at the top. a lot of fibers and stuff down here at the bottom. So we're just going to leave it for a little while. And here's the result of precipitation in about 5 hours, I'd say it was sitting. So now we can decant the liquid on top into a different container. Alright, so now it's time to decant. You can see there's a layer of fibrous nonsense from here down. So we're going to very gently pour just this liquid that's on top. And you're going to have to stop before you get all of it out, because otherwise you'll start pouring the fiber out too. You don't want to do that. And you can throw this out into the woods with the acorn mush. So now we're going to take a coffee filter and one of these little flour sifter things, and we're just going to pour this liquid we decanted off through the thing. And I like to take a little shortcut. You just take a pen or something like it and you bounce it off the bottom like that. That'll help speed things up. Okay, now we're going to do that same filtration process again. This time we're doing it to our vinegar and steel mix. So I've only done a little bit because I'm just going to make a quick little batch of ink right now just for the video. Alright, so now you might notice we have our two brown liquids here. This is our acorn water. This is our acid and steel mix, or vinegar and steel. So first I'm adding the acorn water. Now here comes the cool part. We now have ink. So if you end up trying to make your own ink, play with the ratios, do it a few times, have some fun with it. If you're going to use something like a fountain pen, you can buy blank fountain pens. And you're going to want to make the ink a little thinner so it flows good in these. Or you can also buy these style of pens that have the foam inserts. So you would want the ink a little thicker so that it flows slower through the foam. Or, you could just take a chopstick and sharpen the end of it and just use it like a quill pen.